They say you don't disappear all at once. It happens slowly, car by car, person by person, until one day you're standing in plain sight and no one can see you. This is the story of Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne, 60 years old, a widow, a mother, a woman who spent 3 months learning what it feels like to become invisible. And one February afternoon when the temperature dropped to 8 degrees below zero, and she found herself standing at a bus stop counting cars, 47 of them. 47 people who looked at her and kept driving. But before we get to that bus stop, before we watch the world make its decision about Evelyn, you need to understand what she had already survived, because that changes everything. I want to ask you something simple. Where are you right now? Are you on your couch? Your car somewhere parked, headphones in, maybe in bed, phone propped on the pillow, the rest of the house already quiet. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. Because the story you're about to spend the next 2 hours inside this particular story, I don't think it found you by accident. I think you're exactly the kind of person who needed to hear it. And I think by the time it's finished, you'll understand why. Drop your location into the comments right now. Just your state, your city, wherever you're calling in from. Because this channel is built on the belief that good people are everywhere. Not just in the places the world pays attention to. Not just in the stories that make the loudest noise. Every time you drop your location in those comments, you're proving it. You're adding yourself to the map of people who still stop, who still look up, who still believe that a story about a 60-year-old woman and 5 strangers on motorcycles is worth their time. I read every single one, every location, every comment. This community is the whole point. So tell me where you are, then settle in. Because what you're about to hear is the kind of story that doesn't let you go easily. The kind that rides home with you. The kind you'll find yourself telling someone else before the week is out. Not because you plan to, but because some stories simply insist on being passed along. This is one of those stories, and it starts in a town nobody writes songs about. Meredith, Ohio. Population 12,000 and dropping slowly. The kind of Midwestern town that sits in the landscape like it's always been there and always will be. Flatlands stretching out in every direction until the sky comes down to meet it. In summer, there's something almost beautiful about it. The kind of beauty that doesn't announce itself. The kind you have to slow down to notice. But this story doesn't happen in summer. This story happens in the dead of winter. February 13th, 2024. When the trees are bare and the sidewalks are gray and the cold comes in off the open land with nothing to stop it. The streets of Meredith were built for people who knew each other. Wide enough to wave from across the road. Lined with houses that once had front porches where neighbors sat in the evenings and watched the neighborhood breathe. There was a time not so long ago when you couldn't walk 2 blocks without someone calling your name. When a new family moving in meant casseroles at the door and introductions at the fence line. When the hardware store owner knew your father and the woman at the post office knew your children's grades. That time didn't disappear overnight. It faded the way most things fade, slowly, quietly, in such small increments that nobody could point to the moment it changed. People got busier, porches became garages, evenings moved indoors and then moved onto screens. The neighborhood didn't become unfriendly, it became something quieter and in some ways sadder than unfriendly. It became indifferent, not out of cruelty, never out of cruelty, just out of the accumulated weight of everyone having somewhere else to be and something else to look at, and not quite enough left over at the end of the day to look up and check on the person standing next to them. This matters. It matters deeply to what you're about to hear. Because what happened on one particular Tuesday afternoon in the coldest week of the year did not happen in a place full of bad people. It happened in a place full of ordinary people who had simply gradually stopped paying attention to each other. And that distinction is everything. Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne had lived in Meredith for 32 years, since 1992. She came here with her husband, Robert, raised 2 children here, buried the man she loved here, and stayed even when her children eventually moved on to cities with better jobs and bigger possibilities. She stayed because this town was hers, in the way that only a place you've truly lived in can be yours, not owned. Lived in, there's a difference. She's the kind of woman who still writes birthday cards by hand, in cursive, and mails them 3 days early so they arrive on time. She keeps a small dish of hard candy near her front door, The old-fashioned kind, wrapped in cellophane, because she likes to have something to offer when people stop by. And she believes people should always feel welcome when they come to your door. She knows the names of her neighbor's grandchildren. She remembers the anniversary of her pastor's marriage. She sends flowers, actual flowers from an actual florist, when someone in her circle loses someone they love. And she is proud. That's perhaps the most important thing to understand about Evelyn. Not in a small way, in a way that runs through her like a spine. She was raised to handle her own difficulties quietly and without complaint, to ask for help only when there was truly no other option, to never under any circumstances be a burden on the people around her. This pride has served her well for 60 years. It has made her strong and self-sufficient and deeply capable. It has also, on one particular morning, 3 months before our story begins, led her directly into danger. November 15th, 2023, 2:15 in the afternoon, a Sunday. Evelyn was walking back to her car in the Target parking lot. She'd been inside for 20 minutes. Dish soap, paper towels, the ordinary supplies of an ordinary life. She was carrying one bag, not heavy, nothing she couldn't manage. There was a slight rise in the pavement where the concrete met the asphalt, a lip maybe half an inch high, the kind of thing you'd step over 1,000 times without noticing. This time her foot caught it. She went down hard. Not a stumble, a fall, the kind where your center of gravity shifts so suddenly that there's no time to catch yourself. Her right wrist took the impact first, then her hip, then her shoulder. She lay there on the cold asphalt, stunned, winded, pain shooting up her arm. And she could not get up. She tried, pushed with her left hand, but her right wrist wouldn't bear weight, and her hip felt like someone had driven a spike through it. And she was 60 years old, lying in a Target parking lot at 2:15 on a Sunday afternoon. And she started counting, not because she planned to, but because her mind needed something to do while she lay there trying to understand why nobody was stopping. Person number 1, a teenager, maybe 17, walking past with his phone in his hand. He glanced down at her, made eye contact, then looked away and kept walking. Person number 2, a woman in her 30s, yoga pants, coffee cup. She saw Evelyn. Evelyn saw her see. The woman's pace quickened slightly. She walked past. Person number 3, 4, and 5, a family, mother, father, 2 children. The little boy, maybe 6 years old, pointed. "Mommy, that lady fell." Evelyn heard it clearly. The mother took the boy's hand and pulled him along. "Stay away from strangers, honey." They kept walking. Person number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Evelyn stopped trying to make eye contact. She just counted. 11, 12, 13. An elderly man, maybe 70. He stopped, looked down at her, and for a moment, for just one moment, Evelyn thought he was going to help. Their eyes met. She could see him thinking, making some calculation in his head. Then he shook his head slowly and walked away. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 11 minutes and 43 seconds. That's how long she lay there. She counted the seconds too, because her mind needed the occupation, needed something to focus on besides the growing certainty that she had become the kind of person that people step around. At 11 minutes and 43 seconds, a man in a security uniform approached. George Patterson, 67 years old, 20 years working security at this Target. He knelt down beside her. "Ma'am, you all right? Let me help you up." His voice was kind, concerned, the first human voice directed at her in nearly 12 minutes. He helped her to her feet, slowly, carefully, asked if she needed an ambulance. She said no, pride kicking in even through the pain. He walked her to her car, made sure she could drive, offered to call someone. She thanked him, told him she was fine, got in her car and drove home. And she told no one. Not her daughter Nora, who lived 90 miles away in Columbus and called twice a week to check in. Not her son Benjamin, who lived in Portland, Oregon, and called once a month when he remembered. Not her pastor. Not her friends from church. Not a single soul, because telling someone would mean admitting what had happened. And admitting what had happened would mean confronting what those 11 minutes and 43 seconds actually meant. that 23 people had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth the trouble, that she had become in some fundamental way dismissible, that the world had looked at Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne, 60 years old, lying on the ground, unable to get up, and the world had said, not my problem. And if she told someone, they might agree with that assessment. They might decide she couldn't take care of herself anymore, that she needed supervision, management, that it was time to start having conversations about assisted living and someone checking in on her daily, and all the other things that happen when the world decides you're no longer capable of managing your own life. So she said nothing. She went home that November afternoon and she iced her wrist and she took some aspirin and she sat in her living room in the house she'd shared with Robert for 24 years before cancer took him in October of 2016. And she made a decision, not consciously, not all at once, but a decision nonetheless. She would ask for less, need less, take up less space in the world, because the world had made it clear that was what it wanted from her. Over the next 3 months, November through early February, Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne began to disappear. She stopped accepting invitations. Beverly Thompson from church called in late November. The ladies' auxiliary was having a potluck. They'd love to see her there. Evelyn made an excuse. Too much to do. Maybe next time. There was a Christmas party at the community center. She'd gone every year for a decade. This year she stayed home. Margaret Richardson, her closest friend from the neighborhood, invited her over for coffee 3 times in December. 3 times Evelyn said she was busy. The 4th time, Margaret stopped asking. She called Nora less. Used to be twice a week. By January, it was once every 2 weeks, and the conversations got shorter. More surface. How are you? Fine. How are the grandchildren? Fine. Everything fine. Nothing worth mentioning. Nothing worth burdening anyone with. She stopped going to the weekly book club she'd attended for 8 years. Just quietly stopped showing up. Nobody called to ask why. Or maybe they did and she didn't answer. The line between the two possibilities blurred. She was making herself smaller, quieter, less present. And the terrifying thing was how easy it was, how little resistance the world offered, how quickly people accepted her absence as the new normal. By early February, Evelyn had developed a belief, not a thought, a belief, the kind that sits deeper than conscious awareness, the kind that shapes every decision you make without you realizing it's there. The belief was this: I don't matter enough to inconvenience anyone. And on February 13th, 2024, that belief nearly killed her. She woke at 6:30 that morning, Tuesday. The sky outside still dark. She made coffee, 1 cup. She used to make a full pot when Robert was alive. Now she measured out exactly enough for 1 cup because wasting seemed wrong and drinking more than she needed seemed indulgent. She sat at her kitchen table and looked out the window at the driveway. At her 1998 Honda Civic, blue, 212,000 miles. It had been making a clicking sound for 3 weeks. She'd been meaning to take it in, kept putting it off. There was always something else more pressing. At 7:45, she put on her coat, the blue navy one that had been Robert's. She'd kept it after he died. It was too big on her, but she liked the weight of it, the way it felt like being held. She grabbed her purse, checked her phone, Nokia flip phone from 2010, battery at 43%. Good enough. She picked up her keys and walked out to the driveway, turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. Tried again. Click, click, click. Nothing. The battery was dead, completely dead. She sat there for a moment, hands still on the key, trying to decide what to do. She could call Nora, ask her to drive up from Columbus, 90 miles, 3 hours round trip, take Evelyn to the grocery store and back. Or she could call a tow truck, get the car jumped or towed to a mechanic. But that meant calling someone, asking for help, becoming someone's problem for the day. Or she could walk. The Kroger was 1.5 miles away. She'd walked it before, years ago, 2014, when her car had been in the shop for a week. She remembered it being manageable. A nice walk, actually. Good exercise. She looked at the temperature reading on her dashboard. 30 degrees. Cold, but not terrible. She'd dress warm. Take her time. She needed groceries anyway. The refrigerator was down to 1 egg and some milk that was starting to turn. She'd been putting off this trip for 2 days already. Walking seemed reasonable. Walking seemed like something she could do without bothering anyone. She went back inside, put on a second layer, found her purse again, checked the cash in her wallet. $63, plenty. She looked around for her gloves, couldn't find them. They were on the kitchen counter, but she was already focused on getting out the door, and she missed them completely. She looked at the photo of Robert on the mantle, taken in 2008, a camping trip in Michigan. He was smiling, sunburned, happy. "You'd tell me this is a bad idea, wouldn't you?" She said it out loud. To the empty house, to the photo, to the ghost of a man who used to worry about her walking alone. Then she opened the door and stepped out into a Tuesday morning that looked from inside her warm kitchen like something she could handle. It was 8 in the morning when she started walking. The air was cold, but still. No wind yet. The sidewalks were mostly clear, some patches of ice in the shaded spots, but nothing she couldn't navigate carefully. She walked at a steady pace. Not fast, not slow. The pace of a woman who's walked 1,000 miles in her life and knows how to measure her energy. The streets were quiet, a few cars passing, people heading to work. Nobody she recognized. Or if she did, they didn't recognize her. Or they recognized her and didn't wave. Hard to say which. She reached Kroger at 9:15, 75 minutes. Longer than she'd expected, but fine. Manageable. She was a little out of breath, but that was just age. Just the cold. Nothing to worry about. Inside the store it was warm. Almost too warm after the walk. She unzipped her coat, took a shopping cart even though she knew she wouldn't fill it. You always take a cart. That's just what you do. She moved through the aisles methodically. Milk, bread, eggs, carrots, chicken breast, apples, rice, the staples of a life lived alone. At the checkout, she saw Beverly Thompson, the same Beverly from church, the one whose potluck invitation Evelyn had declined in November. Beverly looked up, recognized her. "Evelyn, haven't seen you at Ladies Auxiliary lately. Everything okay?" It was the kind of question people ask when they're being polite, when they want the answer to be yes so they can move on with their day. Evelyn gave her what she wanted. "Oh, just busy. You know how it is." Beverly smiled, warm, genuine, already moving toward the door. "Well, don't be a stranger." And she was gone. Don't be a stranger. The words hung in Evelyn's head as she paid for her groceries. She counted out the cash carefully. 3 20s, 1 5, 2 1s, 83 cents in change. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, barely looked at her. Evelyn packed her groceries into 2 bags. Not too heavy, nothing she couldn't carry. She'd carried heavier. She walked toward the exit, through the automatic doors, and stopped. In the hour she'd been inside, something had changed. The temperature had dropped. Not gradually, sharply. The kind of drop you feel immediately, like walking into a wall of cold. And the wind had picked up, coming from the north, steady, cutting. Evelyn stood there for a moment, bags in hand, reassessing. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. The walk home would take probably 90 minutes, maybe longer, with the bags. She could do it. She'd done harder things. She adjusted her grip on the bags, tucked her chin down into the collar of Robert's coat, and started walking. She made it 6 blocks before she had to stop. Her arms were aching, not sore, aching. The bags had felt manageable in the store. Now they felt like they weighed 50 pounds each. Her shoulders burned. Her fingers, gloveless, were starting to go numb around the plastic handles. And the cold had settled in differently. Not surface cold anymore, deep cold. The kind that works its way through layers and finds the core of you. She spotted the bus shelter on the corner. Oak Street, a small covered bench with plexiglass walls on 3 sides and a schedule posted inside. She made her way to it, set the bags down carefully, sat. Her hands were shaking. Not a lot, just a tremor. The bags had been cutting off circulation. She looked at the schedule. Next bus, 11:15. She checked her phone. 10:30. 45 minutes. She told herself 45 minutes was nothing. She'd waited longer than that for far less important things. The first 10 minutes were fine. She sat, caught her breath, flexed her fingers to get the feeling back, watched the occasional car go by. The second 10 minutes were less fine. The cold was deeper now, seeping through the coat, through her layers. She put her hands under her arms, pressed them against her body. trying to keep the warmth in. A car passed, black SUV. The driver glanced toward the bus shelter, made eye contact with Evelyn for maybe half a second, then looked forward and kept driving. By the third 10 minutes, something had changed. The cold wasn't something she was feeling anymore. It was something that was working on her, getting inside, settling into places that couldn't warm back up easily. Her hands in her lap, bare. She kept shifting them, tucking them under her arms, pressing them together, trying to keep the circulation moving. She tried Nora's number. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. Evelyn didn't leave a message, didn't want to worry anyone over nothing. Nora was probably in a meeting. She'd call back later. 11 o'clock came, 11:15 came and went. The bus did not come. There was a delay. She didn't know this yet. Somewhere on another route, a bus had broken down and the schedule had gone to hell. But the bus system in Meredith didn't have real-time tracking. No app, no updates, just the printed schedule on the wall that said 11:15 and a reality that said something else entirely. Evelyn just knew the bus was late. She stood up, because sitting had started to make the cold worse. Standing meant moving, moving meant blood flow meant warmth. She paced the small space of the shelter. 4 steps one way, turn, 4 steps back, hold the bags, put them down, pick them up again. Cars kept passing. A minivan, windows fogged from the heat inside. A family maybe. She couldn't see faces, just shapes, a pickup truck, work logo on the side. Wilson's Hardware. The same hardware store Robert used to go to every Saturday morning. A sedan, dark blue, a woman driving. She glanced at the bus shelter, made eye contact with Evelyn. Evelyn saw her see. For 2 seconds, they looked at each other, through glass and distance and the cold air between them. Then the woman looked forward and drove on. Evelyn turned back to face the street. By 11:30, the feeling in 2 of her fingers had faded from painful to simply absent. The pinky and ring finger on her left hand, the cold had worked its way in and shut something down. She'd read about this: frostbite, hypothermia, the body protecting the core by sacrificing the extremities. She knew what the numbness meant, but by that point she had stopped thinking primarily about the cold. What she was thinking about was whether anyone was going to stop. 11 cars had gone by in the last 30 minutes. She'd counted them. Same way she'd counted people in the Target parking lot, because counting gave her mind something to do. 11 cars, 11 chances for someone to slow down, to pull over, to roll down a window and ask if she was okay. 11 cars had looked at a 60-year-old woman standing in 8-degree weather at a bus stop with grocery bags at her feet and decided she was not worth 5 minutes of their time. At 11:40, a Mercedes pulled up to the red light at the intersection 15 feet from the bus shelter. Black, S-Class, probably $80,000 worth of car. The driver was a man in his late 40s. Evelyn could see him clearly through the windshield. Gray suit, red tie, the kind of man who looked like he made decisions for a living. He was looking at his phone. Then the light stayed red long enough that he looked up, looked around, looked directly at Evelyn. Their eyes met. Evelyn tried to stand straighter, tried to signal somehow that she needed help without actually asking for it, because asking felt like begging and begging felt like surrender. The man looked at her for 5 full seconds. She watched him think, watched some kind of calculation happen behind his eyes. He looked at his watch, a Rolex. She could see it catch the light. Then he looked forward. The light turned green, and he drove away. That was the moment something broke in Evelyn. Not her body. Her body was already breaking. Hypothermia was setting in, core temperature dropping, cognitive function starting to blur. But something else broke, something deeper. The belief that she mattered, the belief that if she just stood here long enough, if she just waited patiently enough, someone would see her, really see her. Not as an inconvenience or a problem or a stranger who might be dangerous or a scam or just one more thing in a day already too full of things. See her as a person who was cold and tired and had been standing in plain sight for over an hour while the world moved around her like water around a stone. She sat back down, not because she chose to, because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She stopped trying to wave at cars, Stop trying to make eye contact. Stop trying, and she started praying. Not for warmth, not even for the bus to come. She prayed that someone would see her, really see her. Not look through her the way you look through something that's simply part of the background, but actually see her. See that she was a person who was cold and scared and who had been standing here for over an hour and who had already survived 11 minutes and 43 seconds on the ground in a Target parking lot 3 months ago. A person who was disappearing and who desperately, more than anything, needed someone to notice. The world just kept moving. Car number 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, a minivan. She watched it approach, slow slightly. There were children in the back seat. She could see small faces pressed against the window. One of them pointed at her. She heard a child's voice muffled through glass and distance. "Mommy, that lady." The van sped up, passed, kept going, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 20 feet. At 11:55, Evelyn stopped counting. Not because she chose to, because the part of her brain that counted had stopped working properly. She was shaking now, violently, uncontrollably, the kind of shaking that comes from deep in the body, from systems shutting down, from a core temperature that has dropped below 95 degrees and is still falling. Her vision was blurring at the edges, gray creeping in from the sides. She thought about Robert, wondered if this was how it felt for him at the end, this slow shutdown, this gradual letting go. She thought about Nora, hoped someone would tell her it wasn't her fault, that there was nothing she could have done, that her mother had just been stubborn and proud and stupid enough to think she could walk 3 miles in February. She thought about the 23 people in the Target parking lot and the cars that had just passed, and the man in the Mercedes with the Rolex. And she thought maybe they were right. Maybe I'm not worth stopping for. Maybe I've become the kind of person the world looks at and correctly assesses as not worth the trouble. Maybe I've disappeared and I just didn't notice until now. And then from somewhere down the road, she heard something different. Not a car engine, something louder. Something that rumbled low and spread out and filled the air in a way that made her lift her head. 5 of them. Motorcycles, Harley-Davidsons from the sound of it. That deep, unmistakable rumble. Coming down Oak Street toward the intersection where Evelyn had been sitting for 83 minutes. She saw them through the blur of failing vision and hypothermia and exhaustion. 5 riders, leather jackets, heavy boots, moving in formation like they'd ridden together long enough to know each other's rhythms. And her first thought, the thought that came before any other, was not relief. It was fear. She had seen men like this before. On the news, in movies, in the parking lots of bars she would never go into. Men who looked like the kind of people mothers warn their children about. Men whose presence makes store owners nervous and certain women cross to the other side of the street. And now they were slowing down. Now they were pulling over. Now they were stopping right in front of her. And Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne, 60 years old, hypothermic, barely conscious, thought, "After all those cars, this is how it ends." The lead rider cut his engine. The sudden silence was almost violent after the noise. He swung his leg over the bike, stood, 6'1", maybe 220, leather jacket worn soft with age, patches on the shoulders, gray beard, gray hair pulled back, tattoo of an eagle visible on his neck. He walked toward the bus shelter, and Evelyn, with what little strength she had left, clutched her purse tighter to her chest. He stopped 4 feet away, didn't come closer, didn't invade her space. He looked at her with eyes that had seen things, done things, lived through things that leave marks. And then he spoke. His voice was deep, rough, but not unkind. "Ma'am, how long you been out here?" Evelyn's voice, when it came out, was barely a whisper. Hoarse. "Sianging. I'm fine. Please just leave me alone." Oh, yeah. The words were automatic, defensive. The kind of thing you say when you're afraid and trying not to show it. When you've been taught your whole life that strangers who look a certain way are dangerous. When everything about this moment feels wrong, except you're too cold and too tired to do anything but sit here and hope they leave. Marcus Callahan had been riding motorcycles for 43 years. He'd been in the military for 20. Special Forces. The kind of service where you learn to read people fast because your life depends on it. where you learn to see what's actually happening versus what someone's telling you is happening. And what he was seeing right now was a woman in serious troubles trying very hard to pretend she wasn't. Her lips were blue, not pale, blue. Her hands trembled uncontrollably around her purse. She was sitting with her shoulders hunched in a way that said she'd been cold for a long time. Long enough that her body had stopped trying to warm itself and started just trying to survive. And her eyes. He'd seen eyes like that before. On men who'd been in the cold too long. On people who'd started to accept that this was how it ended. He didn't move closer. Didn't want to scare her more than she already was. "Ma'am, you're not fine. You're hypothermic." She tried to shake her head, but the movement was weak, uncoordinated. "I'm just waiting for the bus." "How long you been waiting?" She didn't answer, maybe couldn't. The calculating part of her brain had shut down somewhere around the hour mark. Marcus looked at her hands, looked at her bangs, looked at the way she was sitting like she couldn't quite hold herself upright anymore. Then he turned and looked at the other four men still on their bikes. He didn't have to say anything. They'd ridden together long enough. They knew. Tyler Hollis, 37 mechanic, the youngest of the group, was already taking off his jacket. The heavy leather one that kept the wind out at 70 miles an hour, down to just his hoodie underneath. He walked over, slow, non-threatening as a man his size could manage. "Ma'am, you need this more than I do." He held it out. Evelyn looked at the jacket, looked at him, tried to push it away with hands that could barely move. "I don't need charity." The word charity came out wrong. Slurred slightly, her speech was going. That's what happens when your core temperature drops below 94 degrees. The body starts shutting down non-essential functions, and apparently clear speech is non-essential. Tyler didn't argue. He just draped the jacket over her shoulders anyway. Gentle, like he was covering a child. Not charity, human decency. Luther Redman was already on his phone. 6'4", built like someone who'd spent 30 years doing physical labor because he had. Welding, construction, work that left your hands scarred and your back permanently tight. He had a granddaughter, 8 years old, Abigail. He'd been raising her alone for 4 years since his daughter died. And somewhere in those 4 years, he'd learned what a person looks like when they're trying very hard not to cry, when they're trying very hard to hold themselves together, when they're scared and alone and don't know how to ask for help. Evelyn looked like that now. He dialed 911. "We have a 60-year-old female. Oak Street bus stop. Severe hypothermia. She's conscious but disoriented. Looks like she's been out here over an hour." The dispatcher asked if she was responsive. Luther looked at Evelyn, at the way she was curled into Tyler's jacket, at the way her eyes kept losing focus. "Barely. She needs an ambulance now." 7 minutes out. Luther nodded, stayed on the line. The dispatcher would want him to keep talking, keep monitoring. He knew the protocol. He'd made this call before. Different context, but same desperate need. Jackson Dalton, 53, youth football coach, father of 2 grown sons, husband of 28 years, stepped into the street. He was the one who always thought about logistics, about traffic flow, about making sure the scene was safe. 11 years of coaching it had taught him that chaos gets people hurt. Organization keeps them alive. He positioned himself 20 feet up the road, stood in the middle of the lane, big enough that cars couldn't miss him, started directing traffic around the scene, waving them wide, creating space. One car honked, long, annoyed, like he was an inconvenience. Jackson didn't move, just pointed for them to go around. His face said he wasn't asking. The car went around. Donovan Sullivan was still on his bike. 45 years old, 9 years sober. Before that, he'd been drunk for 20 years. The kind of drunk that cost you everything. Marriage, job, dignity. He'd lost all of it. Climbed back piece by piece, one day at a time. That's what the tattoo on his forearm said. One day at a time. He'd learned in recovery that there are moments when you can change the trajectory of someone's life just by showing up, just by being present when everyone else has left. He'd had people show up for him when he didn't deserve it, when he'd burned every bridge and exhausted every chance and should have been left to figure it out alone. They'd shown up anyway, so he showed up for other people now. It's what you did. It wasn't complicated. He got off his bike, walked over, knelt down near Evelyn, but not too close. Gave her space. Ma'am, ambulance is coming. 7 minutes. You just need to hang on okay. Evelyn looked at him, through him. Her eyes weren't quite focusing right. I don't need an ambulance. Her words were slurring worse now. The cold had her. Really had her. I'm just cold. I'll be fine. Donovan had heard those words before. Different context. Same lie. I'm fine. I don't need help. I can handle this myself. He'd said them 1,000 times in his drinking years, right up until he couldn't anymore. Ma'am, your fingers are purple. You need a hospital. Marcus sat down on the bench next to her. Not close. 18 inches away. Enough distance to be respectful. Enough proximity to share body heat. He'd learned this in the military, in cold weather training, in situations where hypothermia was a real threat. You keep them talking. You keep them present. You give their mind something to do while their body waits for help. What's your name? She looked at him, confused, like she couldn't understand why he was asking. Evelyn. Evelyn, that's a beautiful name. He kept his voice calm, steady, the way you talk to someone who's barely holding on. You live around here 32 years. 32 years, that's a long time. You must have seen this town change quite a bit. Yes, she was answering on autopilot. Single words. That was okay. Words meant she was still here, still conscious. That hardware store across the street. Wilson's. Is it any good? Robert used to go there every Saturday. Robert, your husband. Was. Past tense. Marcus caught it. Didn't press. We just got back from Smoky Mountains. 3-day ride, beautiful country. You ever been, once, long time ago. She was still here, still responding. Good. We saw a black bear, just standing there on the trail looking at us. Luther here nearly jumped out of his boots. Luther standing nearby caught that. That's a lie. I was perfectly calm. You screamed like a little girl. I was startled. There's a difference. Despite everything, despite the cold and the fear and the numbness spreading through her body, Evelyn smiled. Just slightly, just for a second. It was the first time she'd smiled since getting off the phone with Nora 2 weeks ago. Marcus saw it, kept going. How long were you really out here, Evelyn? The question was gentle, but direct. He needed to know, needed to give the paramedics accurate information. Evelyn looked down at her hands, at her purple fingers, at the bags of groceries that had seemed so manageable in the store and now looked like evidence of her own stupidity. An hour, maybe more. I lost track. An hour in this cold. Why didn't anyone stop? And that was the question that broke her. Not because he asked it cruelly, because he asked it like he genuinely couldn't understand. Like the idea of people passing a woman in distress was something his mind couldn't process. Like he thought she was worth stopping for. Her face crumpled. Not dramatically, quietly. The way people cry when they've been holding it in for a long time and suddenly don't have the strength anymore. Because I've become invisible. Her voice cracked on the word invisible. Because the world looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Marcus was quiet for a moment, just sat there. Let her words exist in the space between them. Then he asked, how many cars? She looked at him, tears on her cheeks now, freezing in the cold air. I counted. I don't know why I counted, but I did, like it mattered, like keeping track would somehow make a difference. From behind them, Tyler said something under his breath. Jesus Christ. Luther's grip on the phone tightened. Jackson out in the street heard the catch in her voice, and his jaw set hard. Marcus kept his voice level, calm. But underneath there was something else. Anger, controlled but present. And you think you're the problem that you weren't worth stopping for? Evelyn nodded, small, defeated. Listen to me, Evelyn. He turned to face her fully, made sure she could see his eyes. Those people are wrong. They're wrong, and they're going to have to live with that. But you're still here, and you matter. You hear me, you matter. She was crying harder now, not loud, just steady, like something had broken open that couldn't be closed again. This isn't the first time. Marcus went still. What? And then she told him about November 15th, 3 months ago, about the Target parking lot, about going down hard on the asphalt, about lying there unable to get up, about the 23 people who walked by, about the 11 minutes and 43 seconds she spent on the ground while the world stepped around her, about the teenager who took a photo, about the mother who pulled her child away, about the old man who looked at her and walked away. She told him about not telling anyone, about the fear that if she did, they'd decide she couldn't take care of herself anymore, that they'd put her somewhere, that she'd lose what little independence she had left. She told him about the last 3 months, about making herself smaller, quieter, needing less, asking for less, disappearing by degrees, about how today when her car wouldn't start, she chose to walk rather than call her daughter because she didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to worry her. I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle things. So I just made myself smaller. Until today, I needed groceries and my car died and I thought I could walk and then the bus didn't come and the cold got worse and I stood here watching car after car go by and I realized she stopped, trying to find words for something she barely understood herself. I realized I'd been making myself disappear, and it worked. The world can't see me anymore. Marcus sat with that for a long moment. He'd been invisible too, different kind, different reasons. He was a 6'1" former Special Forces operator with tattoos and a beard and a motorcycle. People saw him, they just saw the wrong thing. They saw someone to be afraid of, someone to avoid, someone who probably had a criminal record and anger issues and was best kept at a distance. They didn't see the man who volunteered at the veterans shelter every Saturday, who cooked breakfast for 50 homeless vets, who drove men to their VA appointments when they had no other way to get there. They didn't see that he'd held his wife's hand when she died 12 years ago, that he still wore his wedding ring, that he'd never even thought about dating someone else because the idea of replacing her felt impossible. They saw leather and tattoos and motorcycles, and they made their decision. So yeah, he understood invisible, just from the other direction. You're not a burden, Evelyn. He said it simply, factually, like he was stating something obvious. You're a human being who needed help, and help should have come an hour ago. In the distance, a siren began to build. The ambulance. Marcus stood, gave Evelyn space, let her process. Tyler was standing nearby with his arms crossed against the cold. He was just in his hoodie now, his jacket still around Evelyn's shoulders. His teeth were chattering, but he didn't ask for it back. Wasn't going to. Luther was still on the phone with dispatch, updating them. Patient conscious, responsive, hypothermic, possible frostbite in left-hand fingers. Ambulance approaching. Jackson stepped out of the street as the ambulance turned the corner. Lights flashing, siren winding down as it pulled up. 2 paramedics got out. Emma Rodriguez, 32, 5 years on the job. Grant Wilson, 28, 2 years in. They'd seen hypothermia cases before. Ohio winter. It happened. Usually homeless people. Usually men. Not usually 60-year-old women at bus stops in the middle of the day. Emma approached first. Took in the scene fast. 5 bikers, 1 elderly woman, grocery bags. This was either a rescue or a robbery, and the bikers didn't look like they were robbing anyone. We got a call about hypothermia. Marcus stepped back. Let her work. Yes, ma'am, this is Evelyn. She's been out here over an hour. Core temp's gotta be low. Fingers going purples on her left hand. Speech is slurred. She was alert when we got here, but she's fading. Emma knelt down next to Evelyn. Professional, efficient. Ma'am, I'm Emma. I'm a paramedic. We're going to take care of you, okay? Can you tell me your full name? Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne. Good. What day is it? Tuesday. Do you know what month? February? Okay, good. You're doing great. I need to check your temperature. This is going to be uncomfortable. She worked fast. Temporal thermometer, blood pressure cuff, pulse ox on her finger. The readings made her move faster. Grant, get the warming blankets. Core temp's 93.2. BP's low, pulse is weak. 93.2, that's moderate hypothermia. That's the range where things can go bad fast. Grant already had the gurney out. They worked in sync, the kind of coordination that comes from running hundreds of calls together. They wrapped Evelyn in layers, warming blankets, regular blankets, getting her ready to move. Evelyn tried to protest weakly. This is too much fuss. I'm okay now. Emma smiled, kind but firm, the smile of someone who's heard that line 100 times. Ma'am, protesting isn't on your option list right now. We're taking you to Meredith County Hospital. You need warming, you need observation, and those fingers need to be looked at. They loaded her onto the gurney, careful, gentle. As they were lifting her into the ambulance, Evelyn looked back at the 5 men standing there. Thank you. You saved my life. You can go home now. Marcus stepped forward. We're following you to the hospital. Evelyn looked confused, surprised. That's not necessary. You don't have to. I know we don't have to. We're doing it anyway. Emma caught his eye, gave him a small nod, the kind of nod that said, I see what you did here. Thank you. The ambulance doors closed. The siren started up again. And it pulled away down Oak Street with Evelyn Ruth Hawthorne inside, finally warm, finally safe, finally being taken care of, whether she thought she deserved it or not. The 5 men stood there for a moment in the cold, not talking, just processing. Tyler picked up the grocery bags, the 2 bags Evelyn had been carrying, that she'd held on to even when she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. He looked inside, checked. The eggs were fine, nothing broken. He looked up at the others. We following? It wasn't really a question. They got back on their bikes, started the engines, that deep rumble filling the air again, and they rode toward Meredith County Hospital 6 miles away. Not because anyone had asked them to, not because there was any practical reason for their presence, not because they expected anything from it. They followed because none of them felt right about just leaving. Because they'd found her and stayed with her, and something in the nature of that connection made the idea of simply riding away feel like abandoning something that wasn't finished yet. So they went. The hospital parking lot was half empty. Tuesday afternoon. Slow day. They parked their bikes in a row near the emergency entrance, took their helmets off, walked inside. The emergency room waiting area was standard hospital. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, a TV mounted in the corner playing news. Nobody was watching. The smell of disinfectant and anxiety. There were maybe 8 other people waiting, a mother with a sick kid, an old man with his arm in a makeshift sling, a young couple looking worried about something. When 5 men in leather jackets walked in, people noticed. The mother pulled her kid a little closer. The old man looked up, assessed, looked back down. The couple just stared. Marcus walked up to the reception desk. The woman behind it, Linda Martinez, 56, 20 years in hospital, admin, looked up from her computer. She saw him, saw the others behind him. Her hand moved slightly toward the panic button under the desk, not pressing it, just aware of where it was. Marcus had seen that movement before, knew what it meant. He kept his voice calm, friendly, non-threatening. We're here for Evelyn Hawthorne. Just came in by ambulance. We're friends. Linda looked at him, looked at the others, looked back at her screen. Are you family? No, ma'am. Then I can't give you any information. HIPAA regulations. Marcus nodded, expected that. We're not asking for information. We're just gonna wait here until we know she's okay. Linda looked at him for a long moment, trying to figure out what this was, whether these men were a problem or not. She just got here. It's gonna be a while. That's fine, we'll wait. They sat down, 5 men in leather jackets in a hospital waiting room, taking up space, looking like exactly the kind of people that don't usually sit in hospital waiting rooms unless they're the ones in handcuffs. Tyler still had Evelyn's grocery bags. He set them on the seat next to him, arranged them carefully so nothing would tip over. Nobody spoke. They just sat, comfortable in silence. The way people are when they've known each other long enough that not talking isn't awkward. Time moved the way it moves in hospitals. Slow, liquid. 45 minutes felt like 3 hours. A nurse came out. Claire Morrison, 32, 7 years at Meredith County. She looked around the waiting room, saw the 5 men, walked over. Are you the ones who found Evelyn Hawthorne? Marcus stood. Yes, ma'am. I wanted to thank you. Doctor says if she'd been out there another 15, 20 minutes, we'd be talking about amputation. Maybe worse. You saved her life. Tyler spoke up. How's she doing? Claire smiled. She's stable. Core temp's coming back up. She's going to be okay, but she needs to stay for observation. Few hours at least. Can we see her? Claire hesitated. Are you family or friends? I'll ask her if she wants visitors. Claire walked back through the doors. 5 minutes later, she came back. She said yes, but just for a minute. She's exhausted. They followed Claire through the double doors, into the emergency department, past curtained areas where other people were being treated for other emergencies. Claire stopped at Bay 7, pulled the curtain back. Evelyn was in the bed, still pale, but better, color coming back to her lips. She was under about 6 blankets, IV in her arm, pulse ox on her finger. She looked small in the bed, fragile in a way she probably hated. When she saw them, she smiled, tired but genuine. "You actually came." Marcus stepped forward. "Told you we would." "I thought you were being polite." "We don't do polite. We do what we say we're going to do." Evelyn looked at all of them. Really looked. Like she was trying to memorize faces, trying to understand how this had happened, how 5 strangers on motorcycles had become the people who saved her life. "I don't know how to thank you." Luther, the quiet one, the one who almost never spoke, first stepped forward. "You already did. You let us help. That's not nothing." There was something in his voice, something that said he understood what that cost her, what it meant to let people in when you've spent months building walls. They stood there for a moment. 6 people who'd been strangers 90 minutes ago and now were connected by something that doesn't have a name. Something about being seen when you thought you were invisible, about stopping when everyone else kept moving. Claire came back. "Okay, she needs to rest. You can check back in a couple hours." They filed out, one by one. Tyler was last. He turned back. "Ma'am, your groceries are in the waiting room. I checked. Eggs are fine." Evelyn laughed, actually laughed, small but real. "You kept my groceries." "Course, figured you went through a lot to get them." They went back to the waiting room, sat down again, still not talking much, just waiting. At 2:35, a woman came through the emergency room doors moving fast, scared, looking around frantically. Nora Hawthorne. She'd left work the moment she got the call from the hospital, drove 90 miles in an hour and 15 minutes, probably broke every speed limit between Columbus and Meredith. Didn't care. Her mother was in the hospital. Hypothermia. That was all they'd told her on the phone. That, and she was stable. Nora scanned the waiting room, looking for someone official, someone who could tell her what happened, where her mother was, if she was okay. What she saw instead was 5 large men in leather jackets, sitting in the waiting area. And on the seat next to the youngest one, 2 grocery bags from Kroger. She recognized them immediately, because they were her mother's bags, the reusable ones with the handles, the ones she'd been using for 10 years. Nora stopped, confused, trying to make sense of the scene. Marcus saw her, saw the recognition, the confusion. He stood. "You Evelyn's daughter?" Nora turned to him, still processing. "Yes, I'm Nora. What's going on?" "Where's my mother? Why do you have her groceries?" "Your mother's okay. She's in Bay 7. They're warming her up. She's gonna be fine." "What happened?" And Marcus told her about the bus stop, about how they'd found her, about the hours she'd been standing there, about the cars that passed before they stopped. He told her facts, simple, honest, didn't editorialize, just laid it out. Nora listened. Her face went through stages. Confusion, shock, horror, disbelief. How many cars? She was out there over an hour, in sub-zero temperatures. A lot of people drove by. How many? Marcus hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. She said she counted. I don't know the exact number. But Nora saw it in his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way the others looked away. It was bad. However many it was bad. Something in Nora cracked, right down the middle. She excused herself, voice tight, walked fast toward the bathroom. Inside, she locked herself in a stall and let it out. Not quiet crying, the kind where you can't breathe, where your whole body shakes, where sounds come out that you didn't know you could make, because people had driven past her mother, because her mother had been standing in the cold for over an hour, slowly freezing to death, because Nora hadn't answered her phone at 10:40 when her mother called, because she'd been in a meeting, a quarterly review meeting that had seemed so important 2 hours ago and now seemed like the most pointless thing in the world, because her mother had fallen in a Target parking lot 3 months ago and hadn't told her, because apparently her mother had spent 3 months making herself invisible and Nora hadn't noticed, because she'd been too busy, too focused on her own life, her own career, her own problems. She called every 2 weeks, talked for 15 minutes, asked, "How are you fine? How are the grandkids fine? Everything fine." And she'd never thought to ask the questions underneath. Are you lonely? Are you struggling? Are you disappearing? She cried for 10 minutes. Then she washed her face, fixed her makeup as best she could, and walked back out. The 5 men were still there, waiting. They'd seen her go in, knew she was crying, gave her space, didn't mention it when she came back. Nora sat down across from them. Thank you. Her voice was rough from crying, but steady. You saved my mother's life. I don't know how to say thank you for that. Luther looked at her, this big, quiet man who understood grief because he was raising his granddaughter alone after his daughter died. She wasn't hard to stop for, ma'am. She just needed somebody to look. That line hit Nora like a truck, because it was true, and it was simple, and it made every person who'd driven past even harder to understand, because her mother hadn't been hard to stop for. She just needed somebody to look. Nora started crying again. Couldn't help it. Tyler got up, grabbed tissues from the box on the reception desk, brought them over. She took them, laughed through the tears. I'm sorry, I just can't stop thinking about all those people who didn't stop. Jackson spoke up, first time since they'd been in the waiting room. Don't think about them. Think about the fact that she's okay. Think about the fact that someone stopped. Focus on that. Nora nodded, wiped her eyes. Can I see her up at Bay 7? They said she needs rest, but I think she'd want to see you. Nora stood, started toward the doors, then stopped, turned back. Will you be here when I come back? Marcus looked at the others. They all nodded slightly. Yeah, we'll be here. Nora went through the doors, found Bay 7, pulled back the curtain. Evelyn was lying there, eyes closed. She looked peaceful, warm, safe. Nora pulled a chair up next to the bed, sat down, took her mother's hand, the one without the IV. Evelyn's eyes opened, saw Nora, smiled. Hi, baby. Hi, Mom. They looked at each other, and for a moment neither spoke, because there were too many things to say, and none of them felt big enough for this moment. Finally, Nora said, Why didn't you call me? I didn't want to bother you. Bother me, Mom. You almost died. I've handled worse. That fierce pride, still there even now, even after everything. Nora squeezed her mother's hand. Mom, you fell in a parking lot 3 months ago for 11 minutes, and you didn't tell me. Evelyn looked surprised. How did you know about that? You told them, the bikers. They told me. Evelyn looked away, embarrassed, ashamed. I didn't want you to worry. I should have been worrying. I should have been paying attention. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. I haven't visited in 3 weeks. I've been so busy with work and the kids, and I just kept thinking I'd come next weekend, and then next weekend would come and I'd push it out again. And Mom, I almost lost you. And the last time we really talked was 2 weeks ago for 15 minutes about nothing. Nora was crying again. Evelyn was crying too now. I didn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're my mother. They cried together for a while, the kind of crying that's been building for months, for years maybe. Finally, Evelyn said, Those men, they saved me. I know. I was afraid of them at first. When I saw them coming, I thought they were going to hurt me. I thought after all those cars, this is how it ends. They're still here, in the waiting room. They wouldn't leave until they knew you were okay. Evelyn's eyes widened. Still. They've been here almost 3 hours. 3 hours. They care, Mom. They really care. Evelyn lay back against the pillow, processing that. 5 strangers who looked like the kind of people you avoid had spent 3 hours in a hospital waiting room to make sure she was okay. While all those people in regular arcs, living regular lives, had driven past without slowing down, the world wasn't making sense anymore. Or maybe for the first time in 3 months, it was making perfect sense. Maybe she'd been looking at it backwards this whole time. Maybe being invisible wasn't about becoming small. Maybe it was about who was actually willing to see. Evelyn was discharged at 5:30 that evening. Dr. Philip Hayes, 54 years old, 2 decades in emergency medicine, gave her the rundown. Core temperature back to normal. Circulation restored to all fingers. No frostbite. She'd gotten lucky. Very lucky. Another 15 minutes and we'd be having a different conversation. Keep warm. Follow up with your primary care in 3 days. Watch those fingers. Any numbness, any discoloration, you come back immediately. Understand. Evelyn nodded. She understood. Nora wheeled her out. Hospital policy. Everyone leaves in a wheelchair even if they can walk. Evelyn hated it. Hated feeling helpless. But she was too tired to argue. They came through the double doors into the waiting room. The 5 men stood up. All of them. Like it was choreographed. Like they'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Which they had been. For 3 hours. Evelyn looked at them from the wheelchair. These 5 strangers who'd become something else. She wasn't sure what yet, but something. You're still here, Marcus smiled. Told you we would be. I thought you were just being polite. We don't do polite. We do what we say we're gonna do. Tyler stepped forward, held out a piece of paper, folded, like he'd torn it from a notebook. My number, all our numbers actually. If you need anything, car trouble, ride somewhere, whatever, you call. Evelyn took the paper, looked at it, 5 phone numbers, 5 names written in different handwriting. I don't know what to say. Don't need to say anything. Luther picked up the grocery bags, handed them to Nora. Your eggs are fine, I checked twice. Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the lingering cold and the weight of the day, Evelyn laughed. You kept my groceries. Course, you went through a lot to get them. There was a moment then, one of those moments that feels significant even while it's happening. 6 people standing in a hospital waiting room, connected by something that had started with fear and hold in desperation and somehow ended with this. Evelyn looked at each of them, really looked. Marcus, the leader, the one with eyes that had seen too much but somehow hadn't gone hard. Luther, the quiet giant, the one whose size should have been frightening but whose presence felt safe. Jackson, steady, solid, the kind of man you'd want in a crisis because he wouldn't panic. Donovan, 9 years sober, she could see it in him now. That particular kind of strength that comes from crawling back from rock bottom. Tyler, young, kind, the one who'd given her his jacket without hesitation. Why did you stop? She asked it quietly, but she needed to know. Marcus answered, simple, honest. Because you needed help. That's all the reason anyone should ever need. Nora wheeled her mother outside. The 5 men walked with them. Out into the parking lot where their motorcycles sat in a row and Nora's car was parked 3 spaces down. They helped get Evelyn into the passenger seat, made sure she was buckled, made sure she had the grocery bags. Then they stood back. You take care of yourself, Evelyn. I will, thank you, for everything. You call if you need anything, promise me. Evelyn looked at Marcus, at the paper with phone numbers in her hand. I promise, she meant it. For the first time in 3 months, when she said she'd call, she actually meant it. Nora drove her mother home. They didn't talk much. Too much had happened. Too many things to process. Sometimes silence is better than trying to find words that don't exist yet. When they got to the house, Nora helped her mother inside, put the groceries away, made tea, got her settled on the couch with blankets. Evelyn sat wrapped in warmth and watched her daughter move through the kitchen like she used to when she was young, before life got complicated, before distance became the norm. And for the first time in 3 months, Evelyn didn't feel alone in her own house. I'm staying tonight. You don't have to do that. I'm staying. Evelyn didn't argue. Nora slept in her old bedroom, the one that hadn't changed much since she left for college 16 years ago. Posters still on the walls, books still on the shelves, like a museum to a person she used to be. She lay in her old bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about her mother standing in the cold. Thought about how close she'd come to getting a very different phone call. Not your mother's in the hospital, your mother's dead. She thought about the last 3 months, the calls that got shorter, the visits that got postponed, the way her mother had said, I'm fine so many times, and Nora had just believed her because it was easier than asking deeper questions. She thought about 5 men on motorcycles who'd done what all those other people couldn't be bothered to do. Stop. Just stop. She cried again. Quiet this time, into the pillow so her mother wouldn't hear. The next 4 days passed slowly. Nora stayed through Thursday, made sure her mother was eating, resting, warm. She called work, told them family emergency, took the rest of the week. On Thursday evening, she had to go back to Columbus. She had meetings Friday that couldn't be moved. Responsibilities. But she didn't want to leave. Mom, come stay with me for a few weeks. I'm not leaving my house. Then let me hire someone, a home health aide, someone to check on you. I don't need a babysitter. That pride again. Stubborn, inflexible. Mom, your car is still broken. I'll figure it out. How Evelyn didn't have an answer for that. Nora left Friday morning, reluctantly, made her mother promise to call every day, made her promise to call if she needed anything, anything at all. Evelyn promised. Then she was alone again. The house felt bigger when Nora left, emptier. The silence was different now. Before it had felt like peace. Now it felt like abandonment. She looked at the piece of paper on her kitchen counter, the one with 5 phone numbers. She thought about calling, asking for help getting her car fixed. Then she thought about being a burden, about bothering people who'd already done so much. She put the paper in a drawer. The weekend passed, Saturday, Sunday. She ate what was in the house, didn't go out, couldn't go out, no car, too afraid to walk. The memory of Tuesday was too fresh. Monday came. She called Nora that evening like she'd promised. How are you, Mom? Fine, everything's fine. Did you follow up with your doctor? Not yet, I'll call tomorrow. She wouldn't, they both knew it. What about your car? I'm working on it. She wasn't. Tuesday evening, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table and looked at the piece of paper with 5 phone numbers. She took it out of the drawer, unfolded it, ran her finger over Marcus's name, wondered if he'd meant it, if any of them had meant it, or if it was just something people say, the kind thing to say to someone you'd saved. 1 week after the bus stop, the anniversary nobody wanted. Wednesday evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, probably a scam, but something made her pick up. Hello, Mrs. Hawthorne. This is Marcus Callahan. From last week, just checking in, making sure you're okay. Evelyn sat down, surprised. He'd actually called. She'd given him her number at the hospital, but she thought that was just politeness. She didn't think he'd actually use it. I'm fine, thank you for calling. Your car fixed yet? The question was casual, but pointed. Not yet. You getting groceries, getting out okay? Yes, I'm managing. She was lying. He probably knew she was lying, but he didn't push. All right, just wanted to check. You got my number. You call if you need anything. I will, thank you. She hung up, sat there for a moment. He'd called, actually called, just to check on her. When was the last time someone had done that Friday morning? Nora called. Mom, I've been thinking, your car, let me hire a mechanic to come look at it. I'll pay for whatever it needs. Please, I don't need you to pay for my car. I know you don't need me to. I'm offering. Nora, Mom, please let me do this. Let me help. Evelyn heard something in her daughter's voice. Desperation, guilt maybe, the need to do something, anything. Can I think about it? Okay, think about it, but not too long. Okay, I want you mobile. I want you safe. After they hung up, Evelyn sat with the phone in her hand. She thought about calling a mechanic herself, being independent, handling it. Then she thought about the bus stop, about standing there believing she'd disappeared. And she thought about 5 men who'd stopped, who'd given her their numbers, who'd said call if you need anything. She opened the drawer, found the paper, looked at the numbers. Her hand was shaking slightly, not from cold this time, from something else. The fear of asking, the fear of being a burden, the fear of needing people. 10 minutes passed, 20. She made herself a cup of tea, sat back down, looked at the paper again. Her finger traced Marcus's number. Once, twice. The fear of asking sat heavy in her chest, but heavier still was the memory of standing at that bus stop, of believing she'd disappeared, of 5 men who'd proven she hadn't. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. It rang 3 times. Marcus Callahan. Mr. Callahan, this is Evelyn Hawthorne. Evelyn, good to hear from you. Everything okay? Yes. Well, my car is still broken. My daughter wants to hire a mechanic, but I thought, you said to call if I needed anything. You need your car fixed. Yes. But I can pay. I'm not asking for charity. I just need a recommendation. Someone reliable who won't take advantage. What's wrong with it? It won't start. Just clicks. Battery probably. Maybe alternator. When's good for us to come look at it? Us. Tyler's a mechanic. I know my way around an engine. We can probably fix it. Oh no, I wasn't asking you to fix it. Just recommend someone. I'm recommending us. We're free Saturday morning. That work. Evelyn sat there, phone pressed to her ear, not sure what to say. Part of her wanted to say no, to insist she could handle this herself, to maintain that wall of independence she'd spent 60 years building. But another part of her, a part that had been growing since Tuesday at that bus stop, thought, what if I just say yes? What if I just let someone help? Saturday morning would be fine, but please let me pay you. We'll talk about it Saturday. See you around 9. He hung up before she could argue. Evelyn sat there holding the dead phone. They were coming. To her house. To fix her car. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. Maybe both. Saturday morning, February 27th, 9 o'clock. Evelyn heard them before she saw them. That rumble, those engines, the sound that had terrified her 2 weeks ago and now felt like something else entirely. She went to the kitchen window, looked out, 3 motorcycles in her driveway. Marcus, Tyler, Luther. They were already getting off their bikes. Tyler had a toolbox. Marcus had another. They were talking, laughing about something. Easy, comfortable. Then Marcus walked up to her front door, knocked. Evelyn opened it. Morning, Evelyn. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Not a problem. Tyler here is going to take a look. Mind if we pull it out of the garage? Of course, whatever you need. She gave them her keys. They opened the garage, pushed her Honda Civic out into the driveway, propped the hood, and Evelyn stood on her front porch in her cardigan and watched 3 large men in leather jackets work on her car. She should go inside, give them space, but she couldn't look away because this was kindness, real kindness, the kind that shows up at 9 in the morning on a Saturday with tools and knowledge and no expectation of anything in return. Tyler was under the hood, checking connections, testing voltage. Battery's dead, completely dead. Alternator's shot too. That's why it wasn't charging. Marcus looked at Evelyn. You got jumper cables? I think so. In the garage. Luther found them. They hooked up the Honda to Luther's bike, got it started, let it run for a minute. Tyler was already pulling parts off the alternator, working fast, efficient. I got a spare alternator at my shop, right size. I'll run and grab it. I can pay for it. Tyler looked up, grease on his hands, smile on his face. It's a spare, been sitting on my shelf for 2 years. You'd be doing me a favor taking it. He got on his bike, rode off. Evelyn stood there with Marcus and Luther. For a moment, Evelyn felt something crack inside. Not gratitude, rage, pure white-hot rage. Because she'd spent 60 years taking care of herself. And now these men, these strangers were here on her driveway acting like she couldn't handle a simple car problem. Like she was some helpless old woman who needed saving. The anger rose in her throat, sharp, bitter. You want some coffee? The words came out harsher than she intended. Marcus looked at her, really looked, like he could see right through to that anger. That'd be great, actually. She went inside, made a pot, real coffee, not instant. The good kind she saved for when people visited. She made sandwiches too. Ham and cheese, lettuce, tomato, mustard, cut them diagonal, arranged them on a plate with napkins. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from that rage, from the overwhelming feeling of being seen as incapable, as someone who needed help, as someone who couldn't manage. But then she thought about 11 minutes and 43 seconds on cold asphalt, about 60 minutes at a bus stop, about pride that had almost killed her, and the rage faded. Not completely, but enough. She carried the tray outside, set it on the porch railing. It's not much, but Luther took a sandwich, bit into it, his eyes closed for a second. Ma'am, this is the best sandwich I've had in a month. Marcus took one too. Luther's not wrong, this is good. Evelyn felt something warm spread through her chest, something that wasn't quite happiness, but was close, the feeling of being useful. of having something to offer. Tyler came back 30 minutes later. New alternator in a box. He installed it fast, 45 minutes of work, checking connections, testing, making sure everything was tight. Then he test drove it around the block twice. Came back with the engine purring smooth. You're all set, should run fine now. But if you have any problems, you call me anytime. How much do I owe you? Nothing. I can't just, you fed us. We're square. Marcus stepped in. Evelyn, let us do this, please. And there was something in his voice, something that said this wasn't just about fixing a car. This was about something bigger, about showing up, about being the kind of person who stops. Evelyn nodded, too emotional to speak. They packed up their tools, got ready to leave. As they were mounting their bikes, Evelyn called out, "Would you stay for dinner?" They turned, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I'm asking. Please, let me cook for you. It's the least I can do." Marcus looked at the others. They nodded. "What time?" "6. We'll be here." They rode off, and Evelyn went inside and cried. Not sad crying, something else. Relief maybe, or gratitude, or the overwhelming feeling of being seen and valued and cared for by people who had no obligation to care. She cooked all afternoon. Pot roast. Robert's recipe. The one she hadn't made since he died because it was too big for one person, and cooking it alone felt wrong. Mashed potatoes from scratch. Real butter. Real cream. Roasted vegetables. Carrots. Brussels sprouts. Olive oil and sea salt. Rolls. Store-bought but good ones. Apple pie for dessert. From scratch. Took 3 hours. Worth it. She set the table with her good dishes, the ones her mother had given her, the china that only came out for holidays. This felt like a holiday. At 6 o'clock, she heard the engines. 5 this time. All of them. They came to the door. Marcus, Luther, Jackson, Donovan, Tyler. Some of them had cleaned up, changed shirts. Luther had shaved, like they understood this was important, like they were honoring what she was trying to do. "Come in, please." They filled her small dining room, big men in a small space, but somehow it didn't feel crowded. It felt full. There's a difference. She served dinner. They ate. They talked about motorcycles, about the route they'd taken back from Smoky Mountains, about Tyler's garage and the weird repairs people brought in. Luther talked about his granddaughter. Abigail, 8 years old, smart, top of her class, learning piano. Jackson talked about his football team, about the kid who couldn't catch a ball at the start of the season and just made the winning touchdown last week. Donovan talked about his podcast, about the people he interviewed, about how everyone's story matters if you listen close enough. And Evelyn talked about Robert, about her years in Meredith, about her children, about the life she'd built here. She talked more than she'd talked in months, because these men listened, really listened, didn't check phones, didn't look away, just listened like what she had to say mattered. After dinner, after coffee, when the sun had set and the kitchen was clean and everyone was full and content, Evelyn stood up. She looked at all of them, these 5 men who'd saved her life, who'd fixed her car, who'd sat at her table and made her feel human again. And she said what she'd been trying to say since the bus stop. "You didn't just help me that day." The room went quiet. "You reminded me I was worth helping." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I'd spent 3 months making myself smaller, quieter, needing less, because I thought that's what the world wanted, because 23 people walked past me in a parking lot, and I stood at a bus stop, and I thought they were telling me something, that I didn't matter, that I'd become too much trouble." She wiped her eyes. "And then you stopped, and you stayed, and you kept showing up, and you're here right now eating my pot roast and acting like it's the most normal thing in the world, but it's not. It's not normal. It's extraordinary." She looked at each of them. "You saved my life. But more than that, you saved me from disappearing." Nobody spoke for a moment, and then Marcus said, "Evelyn, you were never going to disappear. You're too strong for that." She shook her head. "I was disappearing. I was letting it happen, but not anymore." And she meant it. Something had changed, something fundamental. She wasn't going to make herself small anymore. Wasn't going to need less. Ask for less. Be less. She was 60 years old and she mattered, and 5 strangers on motorcycles had reminded her of that. The next morning was Sunday, March 3rd. Evelyn got up early, made coffee, got dressed in her good clothes. She drove to First Baptist Church. Her car ran perfectly. Tyler had been right. She parked in her usual spot, walked in through the front doors. People greeted her. Beverly Thompson, Margaret Richardson, others she'd been avoiding for months. "Evelyn, good to see you back. We missed you." She smiled, real smiles, not the forced ones from before. Pastor William James did his sermon. Evelyn barely heard it. She was thinking about what came after, about the testimony time, the part where people could share, about what she was going to say. When Pastor James finished his sermon, he opened the floor like he always did. "Does anyone have anything they'd like to share with the congregation?" Usually there was silence. Maybe one person. Maybe. Evelyn stood up. 200 people turned to look. In 30 years of attending this church, Evelyn had never stood during testimony time. Never said a word. Pastor James looked surprised. Pleased. "Evelyn, please." She walked to the front, legs shaking, heart pounding, but determined. When she turned to face the congregation, she saw them all at once. Beverly Thompson in the third row, Margaret Richardson near the back. 200 faces. People who'd known her for decades, who'd watched her disappear over 3 months and never asked why. And for a moment, just a moment, Evelyn wanted to run, to sit back down, to keep her shame private. But then she thought about 11 minutes and 43 seconds on cold asphalt, about 60 minutes at a bus stop, about 5 men who'd stopped when no one else would, and she decided no more hiding. She took the microphone, looked out at all those faces, people she'd known for years, decades, some of them. And she told them everything, about the Target parking lot, about the 11 minutes and 43 seconds, about the 23 people who walked past, about making herself smaller, about disappearing by degrees, about February 13th, about her car dying, about walking to Kroger, about the bus stop, about the hour in the cold. She didn't cry. She wanted them to hear this clearly, wanted every word to land. She told them about the 5 men on motorcycles, about being afraid when she saw them coming, about how they stopped when nobody else would, about how they saved her, about how they kept showing up, about how they fixed her car and sat at her table and treated her like she mattered. I stood at that bus stop for over an hour. I watched car after car drive by, and I thought the world was telling me I didn't matter, that I'd become invisible. She looked around the room, but I was wrong. I wasn't invisible. I was just looking at the wrong people. Those 5 men didn't look like the kind of people you'd think would stop. They looked like the kind of people you'd avoid, the kind you'd be afraid of. But they're the ones who saw me. They're the ones who cared. And it made me realize something. I'd been making myself disappear. I'd been needing less and asking for less and being less because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, because I didn't want to be a burden. Her voice got stronger. But we don't become burdens by needing help. We become invisible by pretending we don't. So I'm standing here today to tell you, if you're feeling invisible, if you think you don't matter, if you've stopped asking for help because you don't want to bother anyone, stop. Please stop. You matter. You're worth stopping for. You're worth showing up for. And if you see someone standing in the cold, literally or figuratively, please, just stop. She handed the microphone back to Pastor James, walked back to her seat. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then Catherine Dalton stood up, started clapping. Then the whole congregation stood. Everyone, 200 people, standing ovation. Evelyn sat there crying while they clapped. After the service, people came to talk to her. Not 47 this time, but many. Some apologized. They'd driven past bus stops, past parking lots, past people who needed help. They hadn't stopped. They were sorry. Some shared their own stories about feeling invisible, about disappearing, about needing help and being too afraid to ask. Some just hugged her. Beverly Thompson cried, "I'm sorry I rushed past you at Kroger that morning. I should have asked if you were okay." Margaret Richardson held her hand. "I stopped calling. I thought you wanted space. I'm sorry. Pastor James thanked her. That took courage. Real courage. By the time Evelyn left the church, it was past noon. She sat in her car for a moment. Overwhelmed, she'd told her story. The whole thing. No hiding, no pretending. And the world hadn't ended. People hadn't thought less of her. They'd seen her, really seen her, and she felt lighter than she'd felt in years. The story spread the way stories spread in small towns, person to person, over coffee, over phone calls. Jennifer Davis, who'd been at church that morning, told her daughter Amanda. Amanda worked at the Meredith Tribune, local journalist, always looking for human interest stories. Amanda called Evelyn on Tuesday. Mrs. Hawthorne, this is Amanda Davis from the Tribune. My mother told me your story about the bus stop, about the bikers. I'd love to do a piece on it. Would you be willing to talk to me? Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep this private, to not make it bigger than it was. But another part thought maybe someone needs to hear this. Maybe someone else is standing at their own bus stop, making themselves invisible, thinking they don't matter. Yes, I'll talk to you. The article ran on March 8th, front page. Above the fold, big headline. 5 bikers stop when others didn't. Local woman's story of survival and strangers who cared. The article was good, fair, honest. It told Evelyn's story. It told about the bikers. It asked the uncomfortable question, how do people drive by without stopping? Within 24 hours, the story was shared 4,200 times on Facebook. Local news picked it up, then regional news. By March 12th, it was on Columbus Dispatch, Cincinnati Enquirer. By March 25th, it was national. CNN did a segment. Anderson Cooper interviewed Marcus. 8 minutes. Prime time. Marcus was uncomfortable on camera, you could tell, but he was honest. We didn't do anything special. We saw someone who needed help and we stopped. That should be normal. That should be but what everyone does. The fact that people didn't stop, that's the story. Not that we did. The segment went viral. 2.1 million views in 3 days. Good Morning America called. They wanted to do a feature. Would Marcus and the others come on? They said yes, reluctantly. But yes. The segment aired April 3rd, 6 minutes. Michael Strahan interviewed them, asked about that day, about why they stopped. Tyler answered, my mama raised me to help people. Simple as that. You see someone in trouble, you stop. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter what they look like. You stop. Reddit picked it up. 89,000 upvotes. TikTok exploded with it. People sharing clips, sharing their own stories of being helped by strangers, of being invisible and then being seen. Combined views 8.7 million. Twitter started trending, which one are you? As in, which one are you? The person who drives by or the person who stops? The hashtag trended for 3 days. And through all of it, Evelyn's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People calling, emailing, sending letters to the Tribune who forwarded them to her. From everywhere. Texas, California, Florida, Maine. Old people who saw themselves in her story, who'd felt invisible, who'd been alone. Young people who'd never thought about what it's like to be 60 and alone and standing in the cold. Bikers from other clubs, tired of being judged, tired of being feared, grateful for a story that showed them differently. Families, sons and daughters who called their aging parents after years of not calling. The letters that hit Evelyn hardest were the ones from men. Men in their 60s, 70s, living alone. Widowers, who said reading her story was the first time they'd felt seen in years. One man, Richard Palmer, 68, from Tampa, wrote, I haven't spoken to my sister in 14 years. We fought over our parents' estate, stupid money stuff. I've been too proud to call, too stubborn. Then I saw your story, saw what pride cost you, almost cost you your life. I called Janet last night. We talked for 3 hours. We're meeting next week. Thank you for having the courage to tell your story. Evelyn cried reading that letter. Her story had saved more than just her. In Meredith, things changed. Target installed emergency call buttons in their parking lot. 4 locations, big, red, clearly marked. Press for help. The Transit Authority launched a real-time bus tracking app, so people wouldn't wait in the cold not knowing when or if the bus was coming. City Council formed a community program. Look Up Meredith, volunteers checking on isolated seniors, weekly calls, monthly visits, making sure nobody disappeared. 127 people signed up in the first week. Evelyn was asked to co-found it. She said yes. And through it all, through the interviews, and the attention, and the letters, and the changes, Evelyn kept in touch with the 5 men who'd saved her. Weekly dinners, sometimes at her house, sometimes at Jackson and Catherine's place, sometimes at a diner in town. They became friends, real friends. Luther brought Abigail over sometimes, the little girl who called Evelyn Miss Evelyn and showed her piano pieces she'd learned. Tyler brought Claire Morrison, the nurse from the hospital. They'd started dating in March. He was going to propose soon. Evelyn could tell. Marcus came alone, always alone, but less alone than before somehow. Like having this group, this family of sorts, had filled something that had been empty a long time. 1 year passed, February 13th, 2025. Evelyn woke that morning and looked at the calendar. 1 year since the bus stop, since the cold, since that day. She'd planned for this, spent 2 days cooking, set her table with the good china again, the dishes her mother had given her that she'd only used twice in 10 years. Tonight they were all coming. The 5 bikers and their families, Nora and her family, 16 people total. A celebration, not of the trauma, of what came after. They arrived at 6:30, the rumble of engines, the sound that meant safety now, that meant family. Everyone came inside, kids running around, adults laughing, the house full in a way it hadn't been since Robert died. They ate, pot roast again, Evelyn's specialty now, mashed potatoes, vegetables, rolls, pie. At 9:15, when everyone was full and happy and the kids were starting to get sleepy, Evelyn stood up. She looked around the table, at all these people, these faces that had become so dear to her. She raised her glass of water, didn't trust her voice with anything stronger. 1 year ago today, I stood at a bus stop. The table went quiet. I stood there believing I'd disappeared, that the world had decided I didn't matter. She looked at the 5 bikers. Then you stopped. But you didn't just stop. You reminded me I was worth stopping for. You gave me back my life, not just by calling the ambulance, by showing up, by fixing my car, by sitting at this table and making me feel human again. Her voice was shaking, but she kept going. I had a daughter who didn't know I was disappearing, grandchildren who thought I was just busy, a whole life I was making smaller and smaller. She looked at Nora. You gave it back. She looked at everyone, all of you, by seeing me, by stopping, by refusing to let me disappear. So this dinner isn't gratitude. This is me saying I see you too, all of you, and I'm not disappearing anymore. Marcus stood, raised his glass. To Evelyn and to stopping. Everyone raised their glasses. To stopping. They drank. And Evelyn looked around her table at all these people who loved her and who she loved, and she thought, this is what it means to be seen. Not to be fixed, not to be saved, to be seen, to matter to someone, to take up space in the world and have that space honored. People had told her she didn't matter, but 5 people had told her she did, and those 5 had been enough. More than enough. They'd been everything. 18 months later, August 25th, 3 in the afternoon, Tuesday. Evelyn was driving home from Look Up Meredith headquarters. They just finished their monthly planning meeting. 340 seniors visited regularly now, dozens of emergency calls made, lives saved. She turned onto Oak Street. Force of habit. It was on the way home. She passed the bus stop. Someone was standing there. A young woman, maybe 28, standing in the heat, 95 degrees, no shade, looking tired. Evelyn slowed down, looked at the woman, really looked. Then she pulled over, rolled down her window. Honey, how long you been waiting? The woman looked surprised, cautious. Oh, just 10 minutes. Bus should be here soon. It's too hot. Get in. I don't want to trouble you. You're not trouble. You're a person who needs a ride. Get in. The woman hesitated, then she opened the door. Got in. Evelyn put the car in drive. The woman looked at her. Recognition dawning. Wait, you're the woman from the news. The one those bikers saved. Evelyn smiled. I'm the woman who learned to stop. She drove down Oak Street with the young woman chattering nervously in the passenger seat, talking about her job interview, about being new to town, about how she'd almost called an Uber, but decided to save money. And Evelyn listened the way people listen when they remember what it's like to need someone to just listen. When she dropped the woman off at the address she'd given, a small apartment complex on Maple Street, the woman turned before getting out. "Thank you. Really, you didn't have to." Evelyn smiled, the same smile she'd given Marcus when he said those exact words. "I know I didn't have to." She watched the woman walk to her door, wave one last time, disappear inside. Then Evelyn sat there for a moment in her car, with the engine running and the afternoon sun warm through the windshield. She looked in the rearview mirror, not at herself, at the empty bus stop behind her, the one where she'd learned what it meant to disappear and what it meant to be seen. She put the car in drive, and she went home. Not to an empty house, to a life that was full again. Full of people who saw her, and people she saw. Because that's what you did when you'd been invisible and someone saw you. You made sure you saw everyone else. You stopped, every time. No exceptions. Because everyone is worth stopping for. Everyone. Even her. Especially her.